Hello and welcome to the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And I'm Mike Varley, and welcome to our 22nd week. We are covering the Queens Coast, an area so big it takes 2 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is, yet again, another little tweak on our format for the podcast. We have a guest. They're not here. That's because we sat with them earlier. And previously, we kind of introduce our guests while they're sitting there and having to wait. And we thought maybe we'd try a version where they don't have to kind of awkwardly suspend themselves until we introduce them.
So who was our guest?
Our guest this week was YouTooCanWoo's Zach Abramson. He is a fantastic composer for video games and an all-around jack-of-all-trades musician that we had the opportunity to sit down with. He's also a Queens Coast local for 11 years in the Astoria section, and we had a chance to sit down with him in Astoria Park.
Yeah, it was really nice to talk with him. I'm not going to go too much into it because you should just continue to listen, but you can hear about how he got started in what he's doing now with music and how he transitioned his music career, and we talked about making music for video games and much, much more.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting and fun.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes where we focus less on the walk that we happen to do this week and more on the guest who's local to the area. So if you are hungering for some information on what we did this week, there's actually a lot of overlap from one of our earlier walks, which I believe is First Impressions East Queens.
Yeah, I think so.
We'll put a tag in for that particular podcast in the YouTube page where you can find that. And yeah, you can also go back on any of the podcast platforms and look for it. What we're doing is the, western coast of Long Island, which is like all the Queens coast that abuts up Roosevelt Island and the East River. And so that is a lot of Gantry State Park and Rainey Park and Astoria Park, Socrates Sculpture Garden we visited again.
We went right by the LaGuardia Airport.
Yeah,
you can't get to the coast there because the airport owns the coast. That's kind of weird, but also cool.
Yeah.
And then we went all the way out to near City Field and along Flushing Bay, which is a different coast.
Yeah, the Flushing Corona Park section that abuts the marina, which we hadn't been to previously.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the extent of our coastline tour thus far. And then we went inland at both times and were, able to see, again, a lot of similar things to what we've seen in previous Queens walks, which is great because we got to see, based on a different season. We went in July last time, and now we're going through November.
Yeah, it feels different. I kept saying that when the sun's starting to set, there's like a special light over the water that doesn't really exist at other times of year. And I don't know, Mike doesn't necessarily agree with me, but I'm set in that idea.
I don't disagree. It's that we're there at a different time and the sun's coming at a different time and the trees are a different color.
And it's wintry fall.
Yeah.
The colors are all different. It's really nice.
Yeah. The only, major thing I would say about the area is there's so little residential space. The residential space that exists in the coastline is either around Long Island City, which is a relatively new phenomenon, or the houses around the airport, which are kind of interesting. There's a lot of lawn signage about preventing an air train from coming into LaGuardia.
Yeah, which I think we'll find out more about that next week because we're actually going to be meeting with someone that is an advocate for people that live in that area. So I think she'll tell us more about that.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
So that'll be exciting to learn about. But just in general, the idea that if the city had been developed differently, as though, there was always a lot of foresight when it comes to Manhattan with the gridded streets and whatnot. But if there was even more foresight, one wonders what it would have been like, because that real estate along the waterfront now, it maybe wouldn't be all power plants and truck traffic industry and things like that. But that's a large part of it. combined with the parks, I mean, they've done a good job of creating, especially, again, along the East River, areas for people to have leisure.
Yeah, the parks are really, really great. And that's actually, I think this is a good transition into the rest of the episode. That is where we met with Zach. And it's one of his favorite parks because he lives in Astoria, maybe 10 blocks from there or so. And yeah, we sat with him for about an hour and a half in said park. And it's lovely. There's 2 bridges that go across, and the Hell's Gate Bridge is really beautiful. It's only either Metro North or Amtrak, I'm not sure, but it's one of those like long distance trains, not the subway. And it's a beautiful old structure, very pleasant.
That's right. We did a 360 video on that back in May, which we can also link to in the YouTube page. But without further ado, let's start in with Zach. Well, thanks so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me by on your Queens excursion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's so great.
Yeah, it's so funny the circumstances under which like we've been doing this podcast now. We've almost done like 30 episodes now.
It's crazy.
And for those listening, watching at home, it was not intended to be the format that you've come to know and love. It was originally intended to be at YouTooCanWoo, which is the studio that Zach is a part of. And I mean, obviously it didn't work out because of COVID, but we really appreciate you and everybody over there, the willingness to go along with our idea.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it would have been fun at the studio, but I think what you have done with these location interviews has been equally awesome. And it's nice they have all these different, the studio is nice, and like your home setup is really nice, but it's also great to incorporate all these different perspectives in, I think, too, just for change, like literal change of scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it worked out nice. And like hopefully the weather, hopefully we'll have another global warming winter, and the weather won't get too rough for the next few months.
We were just talking about that the other day, like what are we going to do when it gets cold?
Maybe it'll be like last year and it just won't.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Like this was a cold day last winter, like 55, I mean, I think maybe it got a little colder than that.
No, You're right though, because last year we knew we were going to do this, even though we hadn't started it, we hadn't told anyone yet.
Yeah.
And starting in November, I think all the way through till February, like I would text Mike almost every day and be like, we should have started earlier.
Yeah.
We should have done it this year. It's so nice out.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
This was the nicest day this week of our walk, so felt very fortunate to be able to have planned this as the day, not have to screw around with the schedule too much.
It was legitimately cold on Wednesday, that's for sure. I don't know how did you all do with like actually under freezing for a little bit of the day?
Was that me?
I wasn't there with you that day. Tuesday was cold too, but Wednesday was colder and you were alone.
Wednesday was, it was interesting. It was not raining, so that helps tremendously.
Yeah.
I think the coldest day we've had so far was a few weeks back when it rained all day, and we hadn't really taken our rain gear situation to the next tier.
Yeah, that was really rough.
We came home and like couldn't use our arms properly. It was like a real weird, not hypothermia, but just like...
We didn't have gloves yet that were waterproof, so really quickly your hands just get wet.
Yeah.
And in the summer that was fine because it was warm, but then now that it's getting cold in the rain, our hands would get wet, and then I guess they kind of like freeze up real quick, and it's like the end of the circulation anyway, so they're sensitive. So now we have gloves and we have thicker rain gear, and we have like a better understanding of what to wear under it.
Yeah.
But you don't learn without testing.
Yeah. Gloves are one of those, I feel like everybody has gloves, but they don't. No, I don't think New Yorkers really have thought through their glove choices.
Yeah.
It's like it's mostly a style consideration, and they do like the bare minimum of like keeping your hands warm on your walk from the train to wherever you're going, etc. But I've been thinking about it a lot because I want gloves that are warm, like down to below freezing, that also are dexterous and grippy enough to hold a beer.
Ooh, nice.
And there's this set of Arc'teryx gloves that I'm thinking about getting, but I don't know, what did you all end up getting?
So
we still need to work on it.
Yeah.
Because we have, I don't know if you're familiar, I think we've told you about it, or maybe you've seen, we have a pretty important list of where we get our clothes from and
Yeah.
what we're wearing and what we're buying.
Yeah.
The gloves, because it was like, oh, we need this tomorrow. Like these, I can't move my fingers and it's going to rain again tomorrow.
Yeah.
We did Amazon buys.
Nice.
And they're not, yeah, they're like, they worked. The gloves I got are completely waterproof and they're warm, but they were like, I think $15 on Amazon, and they came the next day, and I don't feel good about that, but I am going to tell, I'm going to be honest about it.
We have a tier which is known as functional necessity within our clothing, and presently that's where it falls in.
Yeah.
Now we've done some research, and honestly, it's disappointing that there aren't a lot of American-made options, and the ones that are American-made are typically like work gloves and things like that.
Yeah.
We found some that were assembled in the U.S., but we've brought it up before. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You could put the tag on, and that's assembled.
Yeah.
Similarly with design, that doesn't mean anything, So
But we also haven't done a ton of research into it.
we're going to keep trying.
We're going to keep trying as it gets cold.
Nice.
But as for this particular Wednesday, Jessie was actually, she wasn't walking with me that day. She was giving a lecture, so to speak, or she was talking to a college class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And as she was doing that, she was doing it on Zoom, obviously, because this is the world we live in.
That was my like one recent professional.
She closed
Zoom
the
thing.
door, and it's like, okay. And then I realized my gloves were in that room.
Oh, no.
And I was not going to wait a half hour to pick up the gloves.
Yeah.
So I was walking around. I was looking for thrift stores. There weren't thrift stores available. I went. There was a dollar store, and they had those. Those very thin gloves, basically, which I actually like. They were super dexterous, or dexterous.
Dexter.
Yeah, I don't even know
Dexterous,
that's the right word, but
yeah. But nothing. They're super dexterous. They are maybe not the most quality in terms of like how long they're going to hold up.
yeah.
But I went to the store, and then it was $10, and I was like, okay, that seems a little cheap for like what I'm going to give, but whatever, that's fine. And then I gave her the money, and she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's $1." And I mean, look, the gloves, they were definitely functional necessity for that day. I would have been in real trouble without it being, there. But the fact that they're $1 is like super troubling, and what we're kind of talking about, where it's like, how does that even, like, they're made in China. It must cost like 90 cents to fly it over. I don't understand how that's working.
Yeah.
I have a theory on it that because so many things are made in China, it's not like the company might not be making any money, but like the country of China might just be like, make it like what people will buy because it's the cheapest, and then we will own production of everything. And maybe that, I don't know how like crazy that sounds, but I kind of think it makes sense if it's just like, well, if we're always undercutting everything, then like all production will just happen here. And maybe there's, maybe a bigger company just like makes gloves for nothing because they can make money on shirts or something like that.
Possibly. I mean, it makes me think that just a lot of negative things, and like things where it's like, the perception that I have of the Chinese government is based on news stories, is that it is willing to grind people into dust in the name of progress for the government. That's my current operating understanding. And we are enabling that by purchasing these products. And it seems like it could be a two birds, one stone situation if we start trying to make these things in our country and employ people that are currently in jobs that are becoming fast outmoded, But to do that, we have to tell people that, these gloves are going to be $5 or $6 or $7, not $1. And I don't know. It's just hard. I think it's hard for a lot of people to make that jump where it's like, no, but I want it for $1. And it's like, yeah, but you're destroying people's lives and maybe even your own country if you care about it,
Getting back into the idea of repair your broken gloves instead of buying a new one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the worst. I'll throw stuff out like
Yeah.
the smallest thing is messed up with it. It's like I'll just buy a new one.
Yeah.
Really?
It's the worst. It's like the worst mentality, and it's because I don't know. It's easier to buy something new now than it is to get something fixed. It takes longer to get something fixed than to get something delivered on Amazon, and you could go to a dollar store and get a pair of gloves for $1.
Yep.
It's true.
But
even for me, that I have a sewing machine and I have all the skills, obviously, to fix like pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I do fix my things, but like they'll sit and wait and wait and wait because it is easier to just like boop boop boop.
We have a
click couple
backlog right now.
buttons.
Yeah.
There's one of the shirts from the fall, the poncho, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I would be in the same boat as you with clothes if I didn't live with Jesse, and I am in the same boat as you with other things. It's, you know, it's not about trying to be the best version for every single possible thing. You know, right now we're just kind of thinking about it philosophically, like let's just tackle one or two things, and hopefully it'll like bleed into some of our other subconscious decisions as well.
I think that's it's absolutely true. Just about it, just choose some part of your life that you can have that mentality, especially with things that have like resale value. And I know some clothes do have quite a lot of resale value.
Yeah.
Musical instruments have tons of resale value.
Right.
Recording hardware can go up in price as well if it's like a coveted piece of gear. And knowing how to repair those or having trusted people that you can get those repaired, I think is kind of an equivalent thing where it's like, I'm not going to get a new guitar or something like that. I'm going to like repair this guitar. I have so much respect for my friends who can do that kind of work, you know, because they're adding value to all their stuff. And I guess this is also true with clothes. For me, at least, I have like articles of clothing that have passed a threshold at which I would be generally upset if I had to throw it out because I like it so much.
Right.
It's like been a part of my life for so long that like I am going to put the shoulder pads on this shirt, or
Right.
I am going to repair this jacket, or like the rip in these pants or something like that. And I don't know. I feel like that's always like a good. It would be nice if all your clothes are kind of like that. I mean, maybe back in the day they were like if like you only had like the one shirt or something. It's like you probably really enjoyed that shirt.
Totally.
It was part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this like all day, but yeah, I think back in the day too, like we didn't have like polyester and we didn't have like jersey and we didn't have this stuff that's just like kind of shittily made and like falls apart real quick. Like you would have a really nice like denim that would last forever, not like the denim that we have now that has half plastic and just like shrivels by the end of one season.
Yeah.
But you mentioned quality music things too, and if I can circle us back to when we were going to podcast with you, when we were going to record at YouTooCanWoo,
Right.
and you brought out these amazing microphones that I feel like are similar to what this concept that we're talking about.
Yes.
They seemed like so special.
Microphones are a very interesting part of music gear because you have to break them. They don't break on their own. Like you have to drop them and stuff for them to break, or plug them in improperly or something like that. But normal wear and tear with a well-made microphone doesn't necessarily like wear it out. So if it's the kind of investment that you could have a mic. There are functional mics from the 40s that are still in use today because people took care of them. They didn't plug them in wrong. They didn't drop them. They put them back in their cases with their proper cloth coverings so the dust didn't get in them. And yeah, those microphones are not from the 40s, but they're using parts that were from that time period, and they go up in value. The guy who made those microphones doesn't make them anymore, so they've gone up in value since they were made. And they were actually on loan to us by a friend of ours who has since taken them back.
Oh,
but
no.
It's okay because we got new ones that are almost as good. We made an investment and got some new ones, so we're really feeling good about our new microphones, and I hope that we never have to buy. We'll keep them for as long as we're making music, and we will give them to someone who needs them at the end of their time with us, or we'll sell them for a great price.
Yeah.
So we'll
what
see.
are these new microphones? Is it something people might know, or?
I mean, well, the replacement to get super technical,
Yeah.
the microphones that we had set up for you were based on the Neumann U47, which is an old classic microphone that Neumann stopped making a while ago and has, I believe, since started making again, maybe. I don't even know. But this dude in Germany, Gunther Wagner, was using parts from that time period and remaking the microphones, but actually with like lower noise and like a better signal to noise ratio and like better components in some of the line, the signal chain, and that's what we had. These mics were incredible, and they were serial numbers 191 and 192. They were like made right one after the other. I think they were made especially to order. And the mic we got now is is using the same concepts. I don't think they're using the actual parts from that time period, but the company's called Flea, and I think they're based out of California, but I don't know if that's true actually, so let me edit that part. But I don't know where they're based out of or fact check it, but the mic is awesome. It sounds really good.
Nice.
So feeling really good about that.
Is there like a actual aesthetic appreciation, or is it more just like just invisibility that's prized in terms of like having different microphones? Like, do you want to be able to say, oh, it's that type of microphone, or is it just like it's like nothing at all?
It's two things. One is it means something regardless to a client who comes in, or a recording artist who is a client. You know what I mean? Anybody that walks into the studio that knows microphones, to see a microphone of that level, of that quality level, and that historical microphone with that recording precedent, just as a brand, as a model, means something. It means that you are able to capture sound as part of like a historical continuum of like what it means to be a quality recording studio.
Yeah.
The mic in the abstract, in and of itself, every mic sounds a little different, and there's actually a humongous difference in the sound quality depending on the source, depending on what mic you use. So those microphones, if you are like Frank Sinatra or something like that, there is no better microphone for picking up that kind of voice than that Neumann U47, I would say. I mean, or whether or not there's a better or worse mic or whatever, that's the historical context, because I believe that's what they used in the 40s and stuff on Sinatra.
Yeah.
But it also sounds really good on Deidre, my business partner at the studio, when she's doing like a jazzier kind of lower voice, like lower in her range, her like smoky range, as her husband and our business partner David calls it. That mic sounds awesome. But when she's doing some of her lighter, she also has like this French pop sound, and she's doing the lighter stuff, and I might use a completely different mic for that.
Yeah.
That has like a kind of like a breathier, that picks up the breathier quality of her voice. And it's interesting because it's just mechanics, and you should be able to just emulate it. You should be able to and there are now modeling microphones that you turn on the U47 setting on the mic and it sounds kind of like a U47. Yeah. But it's not all the way there. And just like any industry, you can get there, you can get to 98% for not that much money, but to get that next 2 percentage points, to get to 100, that's where the value is. That's the difference between a mic that will lose value as soon as they come out with a better model, better like modeling technology. That mic will become obsolete, but the mic that is trying to emulate will never become obsolete. So it's an interesting situation with microphones. There's so much detail in these little things that are just mechanical, and how they react to certain sound levels. Like the louder it is, the mic is going to change the way it works, things like that. So there's a lot of different little nuances to the whole thing. But
audio, I think in particular, is maybe the number one culprit when it comes to that rule of like the 98%, that extra, the imposter versus the real article. Yeah. Something about audio, especially if you're in that business, I feel like you can just pick up the difference in a way that you can't with a lot of other things,
Yeah, I mean, I think film stock would be an analogy for like people that shoot on digital and then like make it look like film. Even if they're using the proper lighting and all that stuff, I would imagine that directors and cinematographers say that shooting on actual film is always better,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, I don't have much experience in that world, so I don't know offhand. But yeah, it's interesting. Music is always at the forefront of the intersection of art and technology, and film is too. But like music really has been for the last 100 years, like right at the cusp. But even before that, with the technology of building instruments, it's always like right there.
Right.
Like one of the first things that you do with new technology is like use it in music.
Yeah.
And so there's always been these fun like moments where you're right on that like bleeding edge of that 98%, where it's like, oh, if I had this one thing,
Right.
or this thing that's been so valuable in the past, if I had that one thing from the 1940s, something like that. Yeah, it's interesting like that, and I don't think that's necessarily true in other art forms in the same way. Maybe.
Yeah.
For sure.
So we keep mentioning in passing the concept of YouTooCanWoo, the studio
Yeah.
of which you are invested. And I mean, there are so many things that I would talk about. I mean,
Sure.
obviously, you know that both of us admire YouTooCanWoo. We think you're a fantastic studio, and you know, to be New York based is so awesome. We're very proud of that. And I don't know if this requires a disclosure, but Zach and I used to work together when I worked at Avalanche, so that's part of how we came to know each other.
Yeah.
You know, with one thing that is curious to me, you know, small, middle-sized business, making it work. You talk about the idea of having, you know, microphones that suggest to somebody that is in the know that you are also in the know. You know, how much when you're operating your business does that come up as part of the conversation for planning? You know, the idea of making sure that you're representing as an authority, as a source of knowledge in a very competitive industry.
I think that's like a really interesting part of our business that we actually think about quite a lot. Is when you walk into our space, like what does it feel like to be in our space, and what does that mean to different types of the people that might come into our space? And when you're talking about a musician that would come into our space, having the feeling of joy of having like being surrounded by all these fun things that you can make music with, I think is really important. So like in our edit room, we have like a bunch of synthesizers, and they're like, sorry, they're really, you know, they're really good synthesizers. They're not the synths that you would expect either. So it's like a quirky second take on what synthesizers you would see in a studio.
Okay.
And then the microphones, as we've already talked about. And if you're a recording engineer, and guitars and things like that, if you're a recording engineer and you walk in, we want you to be like to think of the possibilities of all this gear. Like we have this mixing board, and we have this gear that you can use that honestly a lot of the time is like maybe not the best idea to use it because it adds a lot of like work to get that stuff into the signal chain.
Right.
But like it's there if you want to use it, and
Right.
it like triggers that moment in your head. It's like, oh man, I could run this through this piece of gear and then back into that piece of gear. It's like, oh, this would be so great. We could work here. We could do this. And right now, as we speak, actually, we are rebuilding the connectivity between all the rooms to further allow musicians and recording engineers to like do something really interesting and cool, and collaborate. That's another big word, is the idea of collaboration in our space is super important. So it's like we can get audio signals from one room into another room, and we can get it into, so there's 3 rooms. One of the rooms can go to one of the rooms pretty easily, and then back pretty easily. Not great, but okay. It can go kind of into one room into the other, into the third room, and then not back really at all. So, and it gets very complicated. It's like, well, we want to be able to send signal from any room to any room and record it,
Right.
and perform it or record it in any room. And so as we speak now, my coworkers are working on a new plan to do all that stuff.
Oh, nice.
So that's going to be really exciting. And then the third part of this whole thing is, well, what if you're not a musician or a recording engineer? What if you are part of the industry as a decision maker, as a tastemaker, as as a director, as a producer, as a video game producer, like what does that feel like to walk into our space? And that might not have anything to do with specific pieces of gear. It might have to do with like the general sense of gear, but the general sense of musical instruments around. But focusing on making sure that when you walk in, you feel like you're in a creative space that feels focused and feels clean and feels nice to be in. So our aesthetic, as you have seen when you've been by, is sort of like mid-century living room, I guess. And the idea that, when you walk into a living room, you should feel comfortable. You should have a comfortable seat. It should have nice light. Like we're the only studio I know of in New York City that has like that amount of natural light that's also on the first floor.
Yeah.
Most studios are either in basements or like dungeon-style studios in basements, or they're in the penthouse. The penthouse is nice. It's just you got to go all the way up to the penthouse to get there, and they're generally in Manhattan, which has its own set of problems in terms of the cost of running the studio and things like that. So, and for me personally, I come from like a very like purely music background, and I never thought about any of the client services part of being like, I thought a lot about the working with artists part of this whole thing and knowing what it means to have like stuff around that aids the creative process. But the client services aspect of the whole thing was new to me. And, I learned a lot from my business partners at YouTooCanWoo about all that stuff. And, back to the New York part of that, it's interesting in New York as well because in LA, a lot of people's studios are like in their house or they're on like a lot maybe. They have space. There's more space.
Right.
And New York is like, I don't need to tell you all, like there's just not very much space. So like the other part of this whole thing is like, how do you become efficient with your use of space and your use of personnel to make sure that all that collaboration and all those things can happen in a way that like is efficient for everyone involved. I think is another huge part of our space. I think I may not have answered your question actually.
No, I think you did. You did pretty well. And in fact, I think so well to the capacity that you're saying it wasn't something that you've thought about previously coming to YouTooCanWoo, and yet it seems like you had a pretty strong sense of what the beats were, which suggests to me, and this would be my kind of a follow-up question, is this written down? Are there people that are like kind of plotting this out, or is it something that happened organically and you're just kind of rattling it off?
We have many documents but that go into like hyper specifics of client services and things like that, and gear purchases and spreadsheets about what gear we're going to get over the next few months and things like that to aid in our refresh of our studio's connectivity, as I was just talking about. As well as we just did, we have a lot of documents about a refresh of the interior design that we just did. The studio was originally built, this is again like way outside of my range, but I work with people who have a very high functioning aesthetic, is what I always say. So the aesthetic of the space used to be with all this red velvet and white. And it was modeled after the TWA airport, that super ultra mod look. And when the TWA hotel opened, we all went and we're like, wow, it's back, it's all here, this is crazy. I had never actually been to that airport, so I had only seen it in pictures. But it was cool, it was really cool. There was red velvet stuff everywhere, and the hotel was just beautiful. And we all got back from that and we're like, all right, well now we probably need to do something different in the studio because it's time to move.
Because it's back.
So I don't know exactly what they're going for right now. It kind of feels like Miami 1972. So a lot of like coral and like pastels. I think it looks pretty awesome. But there's like some starch colors and things like that, which I think is nice, and it's a little brighter. It's not the dark red velvet. It was cool, but it did kind of get a little dark in there, so everything feels a little brighter now.
Right.
So that's also been well documented. I think for me, I come from a collaborative background, so with playing in bands and working in theater and working in film, video games are extremely collaborative, as you know. So the idea of working with people, even though I had never thought about it, it did resonate pretty quickly because I have worked with people, and I understand the idea of like we have to meet somewhere halfway in terms of our mentality. And if I can make this space a comfortable place for everyone, not just musicians, but all sorts of people that walk in, if I can help aid in that, you know, that's totally a good idea, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was never written down at like the start of our business, although it is part of our business plan to have like a welcoming environment and be like a collaborative hub. Like, it's all actually in our business plan.
Yeah.
But it was assumed. I mean, I remember the first time I walked into the studio before we had created our business partnership. The studio was open for a few years before that, and I remember walking in the first time. I was like, man, this is nice. This is like the nicest music. Like, most music studios are not like this kind of niceness, or they're nice in a different way.
Yeah.
This is nice. Like, I'm walking into like the best living room, like this really nice place that I would like to spend more time in. And, so it was like assumed when we started the partnership that we would continue down that road. And you know, I was definitely called out for I was like leaving a trail of garbage behind me wherever I go, like literally. So you know, I was called out for that a few times. And spilled some coffee a few times. That was not great. But, you know, I actually started trying to dress nice, not as nice as you all do, but like, you know, dressing way nicer. I mean, you know, pretty, I don't know. I still don't think I dress nice, but I think that I made an improvement.
Yeah.
But and then I didn't have a big beard. I had tried to do this a few times before in my life, and it always, for lack of a better word, like got rabbinical.
Okay.
Like, and I didn't quite have it worked out. And David was looking at I used to play in a band I still play in Deidre's band.
Yeah.
Deidre's band used to play more regularly. I used to play in that band on keyboards, and I guess there's a picture of me playing keyboards, and I had this beard. At the time, I had a big beard, and my coworkers, David and Deidre, were like, "You look so cool with this beard. You should grow the beard out." It's like, I don't know. It always goes this way. It's a whole thing. And David got me a beard kit for our Christmas present one year.
Oh.
And it totally works. It's like, you put this beard goop in it and you brush it and comb it and stuff and use the scissors to cut it, and it actually is like a manageable thing.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
you know, I think that was a part of my building out an identity at the studio. It's like, well, I'm like, I'm the guy with the beard. It's like, why don't like David's got the crazy sideburns.
Right.
Derek's got this like mullet thing happening now.
Right.
It's like, all right, I'm the beard guy, so why not go all the way?
That's great. Well, I mean, that speaks to, I think, a really effective, functioning, loving community, you know?
High functioning aesthetic.
Yeah.
And a community of very good friends who care about each other and want each other to succeed.
Yeah.
That's the other important thing to remember about the studio is we're not unique, but we're a group of people who have worked together in various capacities for a very long time, and some of us are related. You know, there's brother and sister, and some of them are married. We have the sister's married to the husband, and so it's a whole crew of people that have been working together for a very, very long time, and we trust. There's a lot of trust that has accrued. You know, for me, I've known these folks for 20 years, and so over those 20 years, I've gotten to trust them like as much as, you know, I trust my best friends and family, and I would hope that this is the same about me. But it would be very difficult to have a business like this if you didn't have that accrued trust, because it's very difficult to run a small business in the arts where everybody's kind of working towards their own goals together, if you don't have that worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And all those elements I definitely noticed as soon as I walked into your space for the first time too. I mean, I had obviously been, you know, next to you for a couple years, and knowing that there was a music studio there, and occasionally I'd see you like come outside, and the beard guy, and occasionally I'd see the guy that looks like he's from the 70s with the sideburns, and I'm like, they look cool, you know, there's some cool people next door. But also just in my head assumed it was the music studio that you're talking about, like dark, maybe concrete, maybe
Yeah.
like music, stuff around and.
It's like, yeah, Chinese food containers.
Right.
And guitars.
Right. But then when I finally actually came into your studio, it was like warm and welcoming, and everyone, like, you all look so cool, but there's not this weird pretentious behavior.
you.
Like, everyone's so warm and welcoming, and it's a really good vibe that you guys have created. And even as a non-musician, I feel like I could come in and make music. I don't know what I'd make, but I don't know if you guys would want me to do that ever. But like, it does, even as someone that like doesn't know how to use any of the equipment you have in there, it's inspiring, and it gives you those feelings of like, ooh, anything could happen here.
Well, I truly appreciate you saying that, because that's exactly the goal, is to be an inspiring community hub, and hopefully without any pretense about music or Brooklyn or any of those things.
Yeah.
That can be kind of overwhelming in Brooklyn. There's like, we came up in Brooklyn. I've never lived in Brooklyn, but the studios in Brooklyn, and my being a musician in New York, like Brooklyn is Williamsburg is a part of my 20s as a musician, of playing there a lot, and there's so much history there, and I think it's like, we're not trying to relive that experience of like being in your 20s and being in Williamsburg, and even though the studio is right in the center of where all that was happening at that time, it's more of like I think we're thinking of it as like a positive place, a happy place where we're using that as part of like a larger idea that's like moving forward out of that, and not being caught up in like any of the pretense of that world.
Yeah.
Not to say that world is pretentious. I'm just saying that like it can become pretentious if you are like living in that, if you're stuck in 2007 or something like that.
Right.
Which I don't feel like we are.
Yeah.
I hope we're not.
No, yeah, I think it's very successful and unique and surprising, and feels very like honest. And I mean, that's why we wanted to do the podcast there with you guys, because it's like, it just feels good, and it feels like there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and like at like a human level.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's exactly what we're hoping for, is that human collaboration.
Yeah.
Human.
So you principally, as to my understanding, do composition for YouTooCanWoo, and more specifically, at least mostly, for video games.
Yeah.
And how many, I mean, was JC3, Just Cause 3, the first project that you worked on?
Yes.
So that's six years now or so, I guess?
Yeah, the first notes of music I wrote for Just Cause 3 were in June 2012.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow,
so
8
you were,
years.
all right, so then 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, it was a really incredible process with Just Cause 3, and being part of your studio at that time, for me, was really something.
Yeah.
I was asked, so if you had asked me 10 years ago what I thought about video game composition, I would be like, I love video games. I would say my love for video games supersedes my ability to play them,
Right.
which is an issue for me, that like I'm just not very good at video games. I would like to be better at them, but
Right.
like I find even with all the practicing that I can do, like I just don't have whatever that, I missed like a critical thing. And I think it was Mario 64. I think I didn't have N64. I grew up with Nintendo.
Yeah.
I had Genesis. But when N64 came out, I kind of like doubled down on Nintendo, and I actually started buying a lot of like Nintendo games at that time were like 14 cents at Funko-Land. So I would go to Funko-Land and I'd just buy a ton of like NES games and just play those. But I never, so like my spatial
the third dimension
awareness, and I remember the first time I played through JC2 while I was trying to play JC3, which is the first time I played any new video game at that time. I was like aware of them, but I didn't have an Xbox 360. I played some Mario Kart and GameCube, never played Halo, none of that. Never played any first-person shooters. First time I was playing Just Cause 2 and trying to get the grapple hook parachute thing, I was like, and I used to make fun of my mom when she was playing Mario Brothers, because when she would jump, she would do this.
That's what I do too.
And I was playing Just Cause 2, and I'm staring at the screen like this. I would start like moving around, and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even actually get my body to stay still. I'm so bad at the spatializing of this game. I have gotten better.
Yeah.
But I'm still not good.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a long way of saying in 2010, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, that's an interesting idea. I love video games, but it never occurred to me. And I had been working in theater and film. I came up doing classical music. I went to school for classical music. And I wrote a lot of songs at the end of that time, but I'd also written for orchestra and things like that. The songs kind of led me into this theater world. I also at the time was dating somebody in musical theater, so I had like a connection to that world. So I briefly was doing musical theater. I also had a connection to the film world and was doing like narrative film. And through that, got to meet people like the audio director at Avalanche, New York, Jason, who asked me to demo on Just Cause 2.
Yeah.
And Just Cause 3.
Yeah.
And that was the start of my experience with video games. And I ended up contributing some music to Just Cause 3, and then asked to demo again for Just Cause 4, which I thankfully was able to get, and that was like one of the best experiences of my life as a composer, was getting to write all this music, and people seemed to were pushing me to write the stuff that I wanted to be writing. Like there was an alignment of my creative voice in the first time in a long time with an outside project, and that has then carried on into Second Extinction and projects after that. So it's been awesome being part of video games.
Yeah.
And the thing that clicked for me with video games was it's a combination of all these different practices in music that I have been doing, and I kind of had never figured out where things landed for me. Like there's so many different things I was doing, and I didn't know exactly where I fit into all those things. And I had my classical background, so I knew how to write for orchestra and love writing for orchestra. I love writing chamber music. I love those instruments. I love Western European instruments. I love the idea of being technically good at your instrument. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as I was in school for that, I was also playing in all these jam bands and funk bands, and really enjoyed music that was directly visceral, that you didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to sit there and enjoy it. It was in you and through you, and the people on stage were kind of in communion with people in the audience, and there's this whole energy thing happening that doesn't happen in classical music. At the same time, I've always loved storytelling from film, and the idea of narrative and theater, obviously, as well, with the narrative stuff. And all those things kind of come together in video games, where you're using the instrumentation you want to use, and a lot of it draws from the cinematic orchestral heritage, or at least a lot of AAA games do. And then at the same time, you're incorporating storytelling and dramatic stuff. And at the same time as that, you're doing all this non-linear thinking about music, which comes to me through the jam and funk band world, where we're on stage looping something.
Right.
Until somebody, the lead singer is basically the audio engine, where he's or she, in some cases, I was in bands, it doesn't matter who the lead singer is, but whoever it is getting information from the audience, they're getting information from the band, and is triggering the next section of music at the time when it's supposed to happen, based on that energy, which is kind of the same thing that the audio engine in a video game is doing. So it's that sort of clicked for me in a way that was a really fun brain thing. It was just man, we can do all these non-linear things along with the classical heritage, the theater heritage, the film heritage, the storytelling. All those things can kind of come together in one space, and that was really, really fun for video games. So I look forward to continuing to write more video game scores as we go, and it's cool being in New York, where the video game scene is not huge, but is growing, and Avalanche is doing cool stuff, and more people are moving in. So.
Yeah. What is so obviously, Mike, I actually don't know, what is the project that you're working on right now with Avalanche? Sorry.
Second Extinction was just launched in early access, which is a very cool. I didn't know anything about early access before this, but it's really an interesting idea of having the community be part of your beta testing, I suppose, where everybody has a understanding that there's going to be bugs, and we'll get through the bugs together and like make a better game together. And
Okay.
like we'll give you a discount on the game basically in order for you to help us like find these bugs.
Oh, cool.
And you know, the game is, that's not all that early access is about. It's also just like less game. So it's like they're trying to hone in on what's working before they expand the game out and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So it was cool being part of like a shorter timeline of a process. My timeline on Second Extinction was about 6 months compared to 18 months on Just Cause 4.
Okay.
And actually longer on Just Cause 3, even though I wasn't like involved for the entirety of that process, but like start to finish on Just Cause 3 was like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
2012, the first note, June 2012, the last note, July 2015. Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a
Long
long
project.
That was a long one. But so 6 months was like, it was very different because we kind of just like, we spent some time generating ideas and then we're like, okay, let's go. And then let's stop. And it's cool seeing like a very small little part of a game that could be expanded over time into something really big and huge. And it's fun. It's like a game. Like Just Cause 4 is a game. Like
Yeah.
that's like, it's very gamey, but not Second Extinction is like, it's just, you just running around shooting mutant dinosaurs. It's it's just really fun. And you know, I like, I don't know, I use like, I describe my own music often as loud and dumb. And I think it works really well for Second Extinction. It's just like, we're going to shoot these dinosaurs and it's going to be super fun and goofy, and that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Nice.
And not much else.
Yeah.
Is there a trailer or something that has your music in it that we can
Yeah.
look at and then put somewhere?
The very first launch trailer uses actual music from the game,
Oh, cool.
which was amazing that they did that. The subsequent trailers, they ended up getting custom music for the trailers, which
Sure.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
I understand why they did it, and it can go really bad, I think, when you misrepresent your game in the advertising.
Yeah.
But they did a good job of choosing music for these ads that, even though it wasn't mine, it did feel like it represented the game in a more in a truthful way, which I thought was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was either the direction you received or that you did on your own accord in order to get yourself in the headspace? Like, was it a Jurassic Park binge or playing Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, or
So,
like where'd you go?
Yeah, Turok was, so everybody was like, I think everybody was a little upset when they found out that it wasn't like a Turok reboot.
Right.
But obviously Turok was on everyone's mind. And the music for Turok is really cool. It's like the first one. The very first Turok has these like cool tribal drum kind of vibes, but they're in this like N64 synthy filter that just, it's very refreshing sounding. Like I think if you were to do it just a tribal drums thing now, it would be like a really generic thing to be doing. But the sound of like the digitally drums from that soundtrack just sound really cool. So yeah, dinosaurs. There's an interesting historical context of dinosaurs. So you think about dinosaurs as like primitive, primal, like big, like there's not a lot of dimensionality to a dinosaur in the way we think of them. It's like he's just like this like unstoppable force or something like that. And then there's this historical kind of ancillary association with how dinosaurs have already been portrayed in the time that we've been portraying dinosaurs. So if you think about dinosaurs just in the abstract, it's like, well, the primal drums or those kinds of things, like that does make sense. That would be something that's like pre-music. But an even stronger association to me is the fact that dinosaurs have been associated with like modernist, like Stravinsky primitivism, like pre-modernist Stravinsky. So, and it comes from Fantasia. So the first Fantasia has the dinosaur sequence in it, where like the end of the dinosaurs, and it's Stravinsky Rite of Spring, and that's an example of primitivism in orchestral music. There was like very famously riots during the premiere of Rite of Spring.
Oh, right.
The choreography was all like the dancers never left the stage. So it's like this very subversive choreography where there's no ballet moves. Everybody's just like lumbering around and stuff like that. I've never seen it. I've never seen that choreography of it, but I would love to see it at some point. But it was used for this association through Disney of like, oh, primitivism, dinosaurs, those would be fun. And then it's been there the whole time with this. So like if you listen to the John Williams Jurassic Park soundtrack, he's referencing Stravinsky all over the place. So that was a huge starting point for what we did for Second Extinction. It was like, well, let's get into some more of these kind of like Stravinsky-isms in terms of that period of his output and like what he was doing. And then also the other films that have referenced that are also part of our collective unconscious in terms of these associations, like Planet of the Apes. Jerry Goldsmith's score for Planet of the Apes is like also referencing Stravinsky a lot for the same exact reasons that Fantasia did for dinosaurs. But then Goldsmith's combining it with like, at the time, this technology, so it's like retro-future in a way. And Second Extinction is actually kind of retro-futuristic, not really, but it's not high-tech future. It's like everyone's gun is rusty. Like they don't want to be there. Like they're like it's like it's not a nice place. It's not that kind of future. It's like a dark future where people are on these like, you know, worn out space stations orbiting the Earth, and they have to go down to the planet to get supplies because they're out of supplies, and like there's all these dinosaurs trying to kill them.
Oh my gosh.
It's like they have to like repair all these ships that broke on the way down. They need to get back up, and there's like people trapped inside. So there's like a little bit of this like rusty future thing going on there too.
Yeah.
So Goldsmith played into that as well. And then there's some other like just like the idea of like a menace that's just like there's no redemption of the dinosaurs, or at least not in this early access of the game. I don't know what they're planning for like later expansions of the game or anything like that when it comes to Xbox and things, but there's no like there's no Darth Vader redemption of this enemy. You know what I mean? They're just like these evil dinosaurs, and you got to shoot them. So it's like what are the other examples of that, and like getting into that kind of stuff. And you know, they didn't go in this direction, but like Starship Troopers was an early reference, and other films of that nature where it's just like these you're not going to go into any depth about these bad guys. They're just bad. And Starship Troopers ended up not being with the direction they wanted to go because I think it was too kitschy. It was too like goofy and stuff like that. But it's still pretty like Second Extinction is still pretty goofy. Like they didn't go they didn't make. Thankfully, I'm glad that it's not super serious. But they kept it like kind of goofy in some respects. So I think that was a strong choice on their part.
And when I've seen the gameplay, there are instances where you are basically in the dino arena with a bunch of your friends, and it could take quite some time before you're in the clear, so to speak. So that kind of brings that what you were referencing earlier in your composition palette, the idea of like a jam session where there's long periods of time. What did it look like composing, or did this fall on you, or was it more on the sound design side from the developers? Like when a big beat happens, a dinosaur goes down or something like that, what did that look like as far as your contribution?
So that's something that is one of my favorite things about, as we were talking about, one of my favorite things about writing for video games is the fact that the music will change based on these different gameplay elements. In Second Extinction, the audio lead for that game was Dominic Vega, who you know from Avalanche New York, who then went to...
Hi, Dominic.
Who went to the newer Swedish office to do this game. He and I were talking about all these different systems that we might use. There's a few different like main ways that composers might make the music work in game. You can change the instrumentation. You can change like the arrangement of the instruments by adding and subtracting layers of music. You can also resequence the music, so different sections of music play based on certain variables. But when we got into Second Extinction, we really started honing in on the gameplay. and Dom would have to answer this question in full because I don't actually know what he did, but I'm pretty sure because the game is sort of like there's either a couple dinosaurs trying to kill you or like a whole lot of dinosaurs trying to kill you. Like it's either those, and then sometimes no dinosaurs trying to kill you. But generally speaking, they probably are. You just haven't seen them yet.
They're plotting.
So they're plotting to kill you. Yeah. So we created. There's basically 3 suites of music in the game. One is these little kind of gestural bits of music that play when you are. Actually, I guess there's 4. There's these little gestural bits of music that play when you are in a very low threat situation. Then there's this music that is like a couple dinosaurs are trying to get you. And then there's like the main combat music where like quite a few dinosaurs are trying to get you. And then there's the extraction music where you are trying to get out. And that's when the most dinosaurs are trying to get you. And so that's like and we had in my head, I kind of had like a system of, okay, I want to, like for the extraction stuff, I want to have like these kind of like the most epic moments, like maybe actually use some melodic stuff, but there's not very much melodic material as the lower tension levels go, and there's a little bit more like rhythmic stuff. And the lowest tension levels have a lot of like moody pads. We recorded baritone saxophone and bass clarinet and just made these like crazy. So it's like trying to think of like what does a dinosaur sound like.
Right.
It's like it's been done now quite a lot, like having like so it's like, well, let's just use like low woodwinds and just make like the screechiest, like craziest noises with these low woodwinds. So I had Derek, my studio partner Derek, and my very good friend also named Zach, who's a saxophonist, and they both did a ton of bari sax stuff and bass clarinet stuff.
Nice.
And it's just like these guttural sounds that we just kind of put into the computer and mess with. So you're hearing primarily those on the lower tension stuff. So that's where I left off with Dom on that, but I'm not. He may have tweaked that, and he may have ended up doing some layering of it himself or something like that. Like you can do all sorts of different things with the individual stems of the audio, like of the music. So it's like if I give him just the drums or just the woodwinds or just the orchestral strings, you can kind of rearrange all those things and kind of create new pieces of music out of them.
Yeah.
For Just Cause 4, we got super micro with it all, and that soundtrack responds very dynamically to all the different things that are going on, which is really fun. But yeah, there's just less going on in Second Extinction, I guess, that would warrant. You don't want to, you don't want to make things complicated. First of all, you don't want to Mickey Mouse. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
You don't want the music to feel directly related to what you're doing, because the point of the music is to create a mood, create a level of tension and energy. And when you start Mickey Mousing it, then it becomes part of like a musical sound design, which is not really there's so much sound design in the game already, you don't need the music to perform that task. So if you talk about like little micro moods, you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway.
Cool. So I feel like this is a question. There's a question that gets asked a lot that I'm not going to ask you, which is how do you get into video games? The question I do think is more compelling, and I think like, being in the city for so long, I think it applies to both Jesse and I. We have a lot of friends that are musicians, been musicians for a very long time, and they are tremendous musicians, but not necessarily going to be playing musicians for the rest of their life, but still have these amazing skills. And obviously, you are. They can't just compose ice cream music. No. So, you were able to make the transition with a little skill, a little luck, knowing the right people, but also hard work. And I don't know, just like, what is it about your experience that you could lend to somebody who has all this background in, playing, but not necessarily knowing what the next step is?
That is a difficult question to answer because it's unique to everyone. It's really, really, really difficult to make money in music. This country does not support the arts the way a lot of countries in Europe do. So you can be you can be in a serious financial situation if you don't have that right for yourself. And a lot of people teach not because they want to, but because it's a way to make money. I taught for a while, and I felt very bad for my students. I think they enjoyed their piano lessons, generally speaking, but one of the reasons they enjoyed them is because I didn't really enforce any practicing rules. And I was sort of like, oh, you didn't practice? They're like, well, that's really your problem, not mine. Like, I don't care. Like, I'll hang out with you for 45 minutes. But I did get mad at them a few times, and I just felt when I was getting mad at them, I just remembered my piano teacher getting mad at me and like how terrible I felt, and I was like, I don't have this in me. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, my piano teacher was like an incredible piano teacher, and one of the reasons I'm a professional musician is because of him. But he used a lot of like intense tactics in his teaching, and I just didn't want to do that. And I feel like it's very unfortunate that a lot of musicians who don't want to be teaching are teaching, because, and whether or not they're good at it or not, maybe they don't want to. The balance you have, like the balance, the way my professor in college always used to say is, like, people talk about other professions, say time is money. When you're just starting out in music, or you're in if you're transitioning from one way of making money to another in music or something like that, you have to kind of go the other way about it and think money is time. Like, you need to find a way to make money so that you have the time to do your 10,000 hours or whatever you need to do to get good at something in order to make money at that thing that you want to be doing. So if you want to write film scores or video game scores, it is extremely difficult to put in your 10,000 hours and not do anything else and expect to make money doing that. And I scored multiple feature films for free, which was probably a bad idea. And a lot of people say don't do that, but I'm really happy I did it because I got to meet a lot of really good people that way, and I got to hone my skill and do my 10,000 hours. And the way I generated income for myself at that time was elsewhere. And whether it's teaching or I was a paralegal for my parents, which was that was something. So my dad, I remember my dad came over to me one time. He's like, Zach, you got to pretend that you're working. You have to pretend.
Oh, no.
Just pretend that you're working, because the other people here, they have to work. Like, so yeah, that was. I think it was worse for them than it was for me. But, I mean, my mom was happy she got to see me every day. But, but that was how, and I thankfully was not burdened with debt, and that was a really important part of that whole thing too. I think if you are burdened with student loan debt, I just don't know what to say, like, because that balance becomes even harder. And it's not only that, it's a source of incredible stress. I think our entire generation is, like, as a whole, in a bad situation from student loan debt, and I don't know what the solution is. Canceling it would be awesome. Finding some way out of the hole, because the entire generation seems to be unable to, not the entire generation, but like many people seem to be unable to get out of a debt hole that they were put into before they even had a chance to get started. So I do say what I'm saying with the knowledge that it's not easy. The more student debt, the more debt of any kind you have, the harder it is to get this balance right. But if you can get your money-time balanced the other way, so that you have the time to do your 10,000 hours at the thing that you want to be doing, that's sort of what you have to kind of get right. As a studio, I don't know, YouTooCanWoo is constantly fighting that balance, because it's very expensive to be a studio, and we take on a lot of projects that, like, this is an awesome thing to be doing in that we're generating income, but is it actually moving us into a place that we're going to be happy? We can't, if we only exclusively do this work, it's just going to be, are we going to be happy when we're in our 40s and our 50s?
Right.
And, how do we get that balance to continually to be aligned while generating the income we need to keep the lights on, but also invest in ourselves and things like that. So that's been, that's not just a person-to-person thing. That's also, as an organization, something that you have to think about, and it's very hard to do. So, that's sort of the long-winded advice: is you need to be really good at something.
Yeah.
You need to know what that is.
Yeah.
There's that, what do you call it, the hedgehog principle or something. There's people talk about in the business, like, what are you good at? I don't even know, I'm mixing up metaphors here, but it's like, what are you good at? What does the world need? Like all these things, and like the center of this. I'm sorry that I actually don't know the reference that I'm trying to say right now, because we talk about it all the time. There's like this center point of like something that makes money, something you're good at, something that the world needs, something that has demand.
Right.
That's like, if you find that center point for yourself, that's sort of like the goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't know what that is, it took me a really long time to come to video games. Like, I didn't graduate college and be like, video games, that's what it is. Like, it took me having somebody basically being like, do you want to, do a demo on this video game, before I even thought about it as a concept. So,
Right.
But you wouldn't have had the skills if you knew right away anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
It took me a while to develop. I had to do my 10,000 hours on film and theater, and I had to go to school for 6 years on classical, and I had to tour around the country with bands before all those things aligned. And I had to be in the studio with bands recording and learning how to record. So I hadn't taken a single class on that. Like, that was all taught by watching my friends, some of whom I work with and some of whom I had been working with at the time. But like, all those things together, that's what lent itself towards me finding that my thing that I like doing. And that, is, I wouldn't even say that I'm established doing it. I have a couple projects, but like, I'm still, just like everybody else, I'm still trying to find my path. So
Yeah. Would you say that you, like when you were starting out, especially when you were doing the scores for free or as a collaboration, would you say that you were in a position where you were like casting nets in all different directions, or did you have a path and you were just kept saying yes down that path, or like,
no
do
path.
either of those make sense?
Yeah. No, I would remember one of the proudest moments one of the proudest moments that my dad has been, one of the most proud times my dad has been of me was when I said I would write anything for money.
Oh.
I was like, I don't know, Dad, whatever, if somebody pays me, I'll write. He was like, it's great, son. It's great.
Right.
But it was a moment of well, I knew that I didn't want to be so going to music school is very different than going to like art college, because music school is essentially a vocational school. But the vocation that they are training you to do doesn't actually exist. It only exists for like maybe a 200th, like a fraction of a percent of the people that are getting this training actually will be able to get a job. And even going to a school, like I went to Manhattan School of Music, it's not the world's greatest conservatory, but it is one of the world's greatest conservatories. And it's even many of my colleagues, even if they're really good, it's hard to get a job.
Yeah.
So it's vocational school that doesn't give you the skills that you need, and a lot of people fall into that teaching thing. And there are a lot of teachers that don't want to be teachers, that are teaching adjunct or teaching in a way that they don't want to be teaching at music school. And I isolated that as something that I really did not want to be doing. And then being like, well, let me try this film thing. I had one connection. The dean of academics from school introduced me to a film director who he was doing his first feature, and he had audited, ironically, a Stravinsky class that I was taking.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, the professor who was the dean recommended me to this director to do the music for his film, which is very nice of both of them for believing in me, because not a good score. I mean, I did my best, but it was it was my best first try. But it was, jumping into a feature is not the easiest thing if you've never done it before.
Sure.
So that path, then basically nets started going there. And then at the same time as that happened, I was doing theater stuff and nets were going there. And I ended up like working on theatrical stuff. And then I was playing in bands and like producing bands and like musical directing a little bit, and like nets going out there. And then, so it wasn't, I don't think I even honed it in until 2015, 2016, when I was like, most of the nets did not lead to other nets except for this one net. And then Just Cause 3 came out, and I was like, I remember being in Soho and looking up at the Just Cause 3 billboard. I was like, wow, like I wrote some of the music for this game. And, this giant billboard is here, and this is like testament to my work, even my small part of it. And that was an interesting moment of being like, wow, that net was one that kind
was a
of
good
went.
net.
It was a good net.
Good net.
Yeah. And again, a huge thank you to Jason Cantor for believing in me the same way that that my professor had believed in me before, where like I had very little experience writing video games at that time, but Jason was nice enough to work with me and help me through a lot of the learning experiences there.
Yeah. And tying it up with a bow, so to speak, it's that from what I infer and what you're saying right now, I mean, that is a New York experience that you're describing too. Something that, you know, it may not, it's unclear if that's going to exist in the future. I mean, certainly the internet has changed the game in so many ways, but the idea of having a large city, and then New York being among all the large cities, a city where networking and having all these nets and not knowing how it's going to come together really, you know, it becomes a thing. I mean,
is that why it's called networking? I've never put that together before.
Whoa.
Is it? You're like working all the nets?
I think it's because you form a net with the people, but maybe I like yours better.
If you are forming a net, were you working a net?
You're working
You're
a
working
net.
on a
You're
net.
working
It's a textile
nets.
thing.
Yeah.
It is.
Whoa.
Yeah, I should know. I'm on it. I'm gonna work a net.
But I mean, you know, it's the New York experience what you're describing,
Yeah.
and we all have it to varying degrees. You know.
I would say only in New York, because if I had known that I wanted to do, I think about this a lot. Like a lot of my friends, I have a lot of friends who have had great success in their lives, and they all knew what they wanted to do when they were in school. In a much more intense, like I was very thankful that I knew what I wanted to do in terms of like I wanted to write music. I knew that from before college, and that was, I think, that was nice because that's a tough one to come into when you're already an adult.
Right.
But a lot of my friends came in, they're like, yeah, I want to write this kind of music. I want to be a film composer. I want to write this kind of like music that's part of the downtown Manhattan scene, or what used to be called the downtown scene, and all these things. Like they knew it already, and they've had a lot of success, and they've gone to the places that they need to be to do that kind of stuff. And I think really the only place in the United States that I could have done all those different things really is New York.
Yeah.
Like to be in the theater scene, again, like not really, but a little bit, and like to do feature films, and you know, in my limited capacity that I did them. Independent films in New York is like a huge deal, and and then playing in bands, like being here in the aughts was, I mean, everybody moved here to be part of the scene that was already here, and I wasn't in a super successful band from that time period, but I was aware of the scene, and you know, French Horn Rebellion, the band that I toured with, has had quite a lot of success, even if they're not like as big as MGMT. That's an interesting example because I produced MGMT at the studio. Well, not at the studio, but David produced MGMT's first EP.
Oh, wow.
Back in 2005. So, well, we never achieved success as a band, but of course we are a part of their success in some way because one of my business partners has worked with them. But yeah, I think that's only a New York thing, or at least in this country. And I always wonder why I never left, but like now it becomes more clear when you start seeing things line up, you know?
Yeah.
So, and the video game industry, you know, is new in New York, and I think that's another only in New York thing. Is I'm not sure if Avalanche had decided to move to a city with more composers that were available to. Not to say that there aren't a lot of composers in New York that could write music for video games, but that is just, there are less, I would say, than there are in LA. There's just less.
Less that market themselves as doing that.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that might have been an only New York thing too. And I know that Avalanche had a push to be local in New York at that time period, especially like, we want to be a New York company. Yeah. And I think that was a huge win for me and for YouTooCanWoo. That we're here, we're New York. So yeah, absolutely. And,
well, the squirrels are circling.
Yeah.
I know, what's happening?
We should probably...
They're so cute, but it's like They are getting closer and closer.
Yeah, we should probably wrap it up before third extinction happens. I guess. But
yeah, we don't want to anger the squirrels.
No,
Yeah.
don't want to go the way of the nut.
Yeah, but thank you all for coming up to Queens. Even though we've been talking about Brooklyn a while, like
I
I
know.
live in Queens.
yeah.
Yeah, we're currently in Astoria.
Yeah,
We're in Astoria Park, and I mean, it was great to be able to talk to a resident of the area while we're walking through here.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Some weeks we talk less about what we do, other weeks we talk more, but it's just great to be able to have New York voices on, and to be able to talk about what their lives are, and you're a local of the coast of Queens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There I am, coastal for 11 years.
Yeah.
It's been and you've in one of my favorite places in the neighborhood, right here at the north end of Astoria Park.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful view and the train trestle and great restaurants and everything like that. So,
Yeah, we got pretty fortunate. The train only came by once,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we managed to escape it. But thanks so much, man.
thank you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Well, that's all we got for this week. Thanks again so much to Zach Abramson for joining us. It was really wonderful getting a chance to talk to him and learn a little bit more about him.
Yeah, we had a great time, and we thought it was great to talk with Zach, and we hope you all enjoyed listening to our talk. And if you did enjoy, please share it or like it or subscribe it or do all the stuff. Click all the buttons. We would really appreciate that too.
Thanks so much. Until next week, take care.
Bye.
Bye.